Welcome to Bible Fiber, where we explore the textures and shades of the biblical tapestry through 12 minor prophets, 2 reformers, and 1 exile. I'm Shelley Neese, president of the Jerusalem Connection, a Christian organization dedicated to sharing the story of Israel's people, both ancient and modern. I'm also the author of the Bible Fiber book, a 52-week study of the 12 minor prophets, available on Amazon. This week we are studying Ezekiel 44. The chapter is a continuation of Ezekiel's vision for the restoration of genuine worship in a future temple. Since God's presence will fully inhabit the coming sanctuary, Ezekiel gives detailed instructions for who may and may not enter the temple. Anyone ministering in God's presence must be morally and ritually clean. The new rules and regulations are meant to keep out any potential defilement and avoid the same mistakes of the past. Ultimately, the chapter's big theme is the strict, sacred order of worship in this new temple, showing God's absolute demand for holiness from everyone who comes near him and his holy place. The chapter opens with an angelic guide leading Ezekiel to the east gate, but the guide explains that this gate is permanently shut. In earlier visions, Ezekiel had witnessed God's glory leaving the temple through this very gate due to Israel's disobedience. In Ezekiel's new vision of restoration, the closed gate represented Yahweh's promise never to abandon Jerusalem again. If you've visited Jerusalem, you've likely ascended the Mount of Olives, as it offers the best vantage point for viewing the Temple Mount and its surroundings. The Kidron Valley, dotted with tombs, separates the Mount of Olives from the old city walls. From this lookout, the East Gate, also known today as the Golden Gate, is easily visible, and it remains sealed shut to this day. The current East Gate structure does not date to the Second Temple period, despite claims made by some tour guides. The Romans destroyed that earlier gate in 70 CE. Today's gate dates to the Byzantine period, the 6th or the 7th century CE, and it was later modified during the early Islamic period. While the gate was presumably open during the Christian era, Suleiman the Magnificent, upon conquering Jerusalem for the Ottomans in the 16th century, had it bricked up. The East Gate has remained bricked up ever since Suleiman's decree. Even though the old city of Jerusalem is now under Jewish control, the gate has never been reopened. All 4 gospel accounts describe Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem on a donkey, coming from the direction of the Mount of Olives. In the moment, he was consciously fulfilling a messianic prophecy in Zechariah. Behold, your king is coming to you, righteous and having salvation is he, humble and mounted on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. The specific gate Jesus passed through was an earlier East Gate structure, now no longer visible and buried beneath the current ground level. The gate's modern closure holds both practical and religious significance. Defensively, it helped fortify the city against potential invaders. Religiously, it ties directly into Jewish tradition, which anticipates the Messiah entering Jerusalem through this very gate. Some believe Suleiman sealed the gate specifically to prevent the Messiah's arrival and thereby maintain Muslim control. Muslims also established a cemetery directly in front of the gate, based on the belief that the Jewish Messiah, being a descendant of the priestly caste, would not pass through a burial ground which would defile him. The next point of reference in the angel's tour is a prince eating a sacrificial meal inside the gate's chambers. Even the prince had to access these chambers from the court, not from outside. This may be Ezekiel's way of reinforcing the point he made in the last chapter, that the royal household, Israel's leadership, should be careful not to trespass on the sacred precincts of the temple. In the past, they blurred the lines between temple and royal palace. The new leadership, represented by the prince, would respect the separation. The unnamed prince is a mysterious character in the vision. Therefore, there is plenty of debate over his identity. The temptation is to see the prince as a Messiah figure. However, in the next section, the prince reappears, and that time he is holding a sin offering for both him and the people. Since Jesus was the sinless Son of God, it makes little sense to associate him with the prince. However, we will discuss the prince more in chapter 45, where he plays a bigger role. Ezekiel, guided by an angel, is led to the north gate of the temple, where he witnesses the glory of the Lord filling the sanctuary. God then delivers a stern warning to Ezekiel to convey to his audience. For centuries, the Israelites had habitually violated their special covenant with God. Among the behaviors God found abhorrent was their practice of allowing non-Israelites into the temple courts. It's not entirely clear what specific historical situation Ezekiel was referencing, or which foreign nation might have made itself comfortable in the Jewish temple at that time. The Mosaic Law did not explicitly forbid outsiders from entering the outer courtyard, but there were certain restrictions concerning who could enter other, more sacred parts of the temple complex. Interestingly, the narrative in 1 Kings suggests that the royal house might have even entrusted the temple's guard duty to non-Israelites. In the Second Temple period, the temple authorities took prohibitions against non-Israelites seriously. We know from both the New Testament and the writings of Josephus that non-Israelites visiting Jerusalem were granted access to their own designated area within the outer court. This historical reality was further confirmed in 1871 when archaeologists discovered a stone sign from the Second Temple period. This inscription, written in Greek, explicitly prohibited Gentiles from entering the inner courtyard of the temple, warning that any foreigner who did so would be solely responsible for their own death. Ironically, even today in modern Israel, the responsibility of guarding the Temple Mount is delegated to non-Israelites. The Druze community, a distinct religious minority in Israel, maintains a long-standing tradition of loyalty to the state and serves in various security roles. Because the Temple Mount is one of the most contested religious sites in the world, it necessitates a careful and neutral approach. If Israel were to deploy Jewish police officers atop the Temple Mount, it could be perceived as biased and potentially escalate the already highly charged environment. To mitigate such tensions, Israel employs Druze officers to police the Temple Mount. This historical progression, from the ancient Israelite temple practices to the strictures of the Second Temple period and even to the contemporary security arrangements on the Temple Mount, reveals a fascinating irony when viewed through the lens of Ezekiel's vision. Ezekiel's call for stricter temple access was not a critique of a historical temple's layout or a current policy. Rather, he was prophesying about a future temple, one that would embody God's ideal of holiness and separation. The irony lies in the enduring struggle to define and enforce sacred boundaries in Jerusalem, a struggle that plays out across millennia, from the pre-exilic period to modern times, all while Ezekiel's ultimate unblemished temple remains a prophetic ideal. In Ezekiel's vision, a strict priestly hierarchy emerges for the future temple, reserving the most sacred roles for Zadokites. This prioritization of Aaron's descendants over other Levites dates back to the wilderness period, where God designated Aaron's line for the holiest tabernacle duties, including approaching the altar. All Levites served God, but Aaron's lineage held a privileged priestly status, offering sacrifices and conducting rituals in the inner court, while other Levites assisted, guarded, and maintained the tabernacle. Among Aaron's descendants, the Zadokites gained prominence during David and Solomon's reigns. Zadok, a descendant of Aaron and high priest under David, proved instrumental in supporting David during Absalom's rebellion. His loyalty cemented his descendants as key religious leaders, displacing the line of Eli, and Solomon later appointed Zadok as high priest for the first temple. Ezekiel asserts that the Zadokites remained faithful to God even when other Levites strayed, some even promoting idolatry. Due to this fidelity, the Zadokites would retain their special status in the future temple, similar to their role in Solomon's temple, as the only ones permitted inner court access. Levites had more interaction with the populace, overseeing entry, preparing offerings, hearing disputes, and teaching laws. But the Zadokites enjoyed more intimate access to God by placing sacrifices on the altar. Ezekiel was likely a Zadokite priest, and some scholars detect bias in his writings. He was not the first to make such distinctions between Zadokites and Levites. He was reinforcing a pre-existing hierarchy, with Aaron's line having higher status and Zadokites recognized as Aaron's true heirs. After outlining temple duties, God presented 6 specific regulations for priests, stricter than those in Leviticus 21. While serving, priests were to wear white linen. Wool and sweat were forbidden in the sacred space, with sweat considered a bodily emission compromising holiness. Vestments were for temple service only, and priests changed in designated chambers. They also could not have overly long hair or shaved heads. This was probably so they wouldn't look like they were in mourning. All temple personnel were strictly forbidden from alcohol on duty, a rule from Leviticus to ensure clear judgment for distinguishing holy from common. This prohibition is often linked to the death of Aaron's sons, Nadab and Abihu. Priests were also barred from marrying widows or divorcees. Beyond personal conduct, priests had crucial communal responsibilities. They were to teach God's laws, specifically differentiating holy from common and clean from unclean. This directly addressed the failures of pre-exilic prophets, whom Ezekiel accused of profaning the sacred things. Priests were also to administer justice based on covenant laws and wisdom. They were the community models for upholding statutes, Sabbaths, and feasts. The chapter concludes by reminding Israel that temple personnel, lacking land, depended entirely on the people's offerings of grains, fruits, and meats. Neglecting these contributions meant the priest would go hungry. In Ezekiel's vision of the future temple, the absence of a high priest might seem like a significant oversight. However, this omission finds an explanation in the New Testament, specifically in the book of Hebrews. Jesus is declared as our ultimate high priest. This is central to the gospel. Through Jesus, we no longer need a human intermediary to approach God. Hebrews explains the heart of this good news. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who in every respect has been tested as we are, yet without sin. Let us therefore approach the throne of grace with boldness, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need. In the tabernacle and temple systems, only the high priest could enter the Holy of Holies once a year to atone for the people's sins. But Jesus' role as our high priest grants us continuous direct access to God. Through Christ's perfect sacrifice on the cross and his eternal position as high priest, every believer can now approach God's throne of grace with confidence. This means that salvation, mercy, and grace are freely available. We can come directly to God in prayer, seeking mercy and grace in times of need, not based on our own merit, but because Jesus has opened this once sealed access for us. This is the power of the gospel, direct reconciliation with a holy God. While the Levites and Zadokites gained their positions through hereditary rules, Jesus became a priest in the order of Melchizedek. Hebrews clarifies that Jesus' priesthood is established not through a legal requirement concerning physical descent, but through the power of an indestructible life. In Ezekiel's day, God had to choose between priestly lines based on comparative faithfulness, yet none were perfect due to their human limitations. In contrast, Hebrews declares that Jesus, our priest, is able for all time to save those who approach God through him, since he always lives to make intercession for them. Thank you for listening, and please continue to take part in this Bible reading challenge. Next week, we are reading Ezekiel 45 and 46. For all the biblical references each week, see the show transcript on our blog or by signing up for our emails at thejerusalemconnection.us. Shabbat Shalom and Am Israel Chai.